Om Shanti. We're doing the video of the power to judge today, and we've got 3 divine visitors. So there's 4 of us all together, and we're all going to be hopefully have some input on this subject of the power to judge. It's a little bit like the power to discrimination, in the sense of discrimination is taken as a negative, as in the racial thing, whereas the power to discriminate is a good quality to have, because you're discriminating in a non-judgmental way, and judgment is also in a non-judgmental way, which sounds almost like against the grain, doesn't it? Almost ironic that you should actually have a power inside of you that is able to judge in a non-judgmental way, because it also says in the Bible, thou shalt not judge. So obviously it was taken as when you're judging your fellow man in the sense of he's bad, he's evil, he's good, he's a saint, then that kind of judgment is like with the saint I would be very warm to, very kind to, and switch the love switch on and the kindness on, and maybe invite him back to the house to stay the night and make him a nice breakfast in the morning, because he's a saint and he's got that. I trust him, whereas the sinner, is judged on a low. I mean, there was always a problem when you got one side of the coin, where there was this kind of impression and infatuation with certain types and certain kinds of people, and how people will immediately see a tramp and prejudge them. So we use the word prejudge then, don't we? So I mean, judgment is all about fairness, really, where you're being as fair as you can, and you're not actually haven't got the concern about people pleasing. You're making the decisions that need to be made with a clear mind, so it's not a cluttered up mind of I don't know what to do, because I don't know what to do means that I'm actually not likely to make the right decisions, because it's fear-based. And then people very often do make the decisions and they count the cost later, don't they? I remember when one person was told to write down all the advantages of getting married and all the disadvantages of getting married, and the disadvantages outweighed the advantages, but you never guess what decision they made. They got married. So you get this judgment that's impaired, basically, because it's based on emotions and a negative emotion. The feeling of being able to be separate from an incident, this separation that's needed to give space for the mind to come up with the right conclusion, because lots of people get the right judgment at 4 a.m, don't they? 3 a.m, they wake up in the morning and they have an idea. These inventions that came from outer space to inner space, it seemed to come from outer space, but it's actually come from inner space. So the actual space that's been created by yourself, because you're not so obsessed by something. When people are obsessed with things, they make poor judgment, biased judgment, judgment that has a unhealthy outcome. And also the person would be hanging on the other end of the outcome as well. So they're desperate for the outcome to be like this, or there's a lot of hope. Hope's a good thing, isn't it? But when it's a hope to do that, an outcome is it's like no hope at all, isn't it? Because eventually there's going to be that hope in something that goes my way, and we shouldn't really want anything to go our way, because it is what it's meant to be. It's not an impaired state. An impaired state is always reactive according to the ingredients of the thing that's come in front of me.
So if I don't want anything my way and accept that everything it is the way it is, then why do I need the power of judgment?
Because I've got my way. I want my way, and I've already got my way. It's already programmed as my way, the way I want it to be. So for that reason, I've got to actually make space for me to actually create the right judgment for fairness to take place. So it's already programmed my way. You know, whenever anything happens in life, they say, that's disappointing, because that's the way they see things, and their judgment is impaired, it means. Because they're judging something that is actually a very restricted, limiting me, limiting my abilities, because my way will be met one day and won't be met the next day. So I've already got this inside of me. I'm already mixed up. And to know that I'm already mixed up means I've got to make space for my own judgment to work, because it's something that works for me rather than me working it. It's working for me.
So you mean to say I accept some situation today and the same situation I can't accept tomorrow?
Yeah, it can be like that.
I'm already impaired within.
It can be like that. Like you say, someone loses their job, because we never know how long it's going to last, do we? A job. You know, so many people unemployed at the moment, but their way was their programming. So there already is their way that I've got this job for life, because that's what they thought, isn't it? Didn't they say, oh, I love this job, I'm going to retire in this job, I've got a job for life, you know? And it's about as reliable as Asda's bag for life, you know, because it gets holes in it after a while, and nothing's for life. So it's not a reliable source, and yet people actually rely on it. They become dependent on it, so the judgment gets impaired, because when the thing doesn't go, it goes against the grain. So I didn't expect that. That's amazing, and people are shocked. So that causes a negative reaction inside, and it's purely because this programming's taking place. People aren't living separate to what they achieve. What they are, who they are, is not separate to what they achieve. So therefore, their judgment will be impaired.
So how do I change my impaired judgment to pair?
To
Pair judgment.
Repaired. Yeah. You actually do start to meditate on factors that you haven't been using. One factor needs to be included every single day, whether you're playing that role as an actor, whether you're playing that role as a guest to your occupation, to your role, whether you play a trustee, actor, guest, anything that reminds you of separation. When you get engrossed in something, it's like that, isn't it? We put our name on the office door, and I remember I was called Train Operator Grant, and they had these name badges, train operator, and people were wearing them with great pride, no doubt, but they were in a very much dependent state. So all you're doing really is actually removing the dependencies, because you existed before all these things came along, didn't you? As a baby you had security, didn't you? Going back. So, you couldn't judge at that time, because the brain and the intellect have to, the computer, the brain, can only work once the intellect is mature enough, once the brain is mature enough. So it's actually like an impaired state from the word go, because the parents will start feeding the judgment, how you should act as a man, what decisions you should make as a man. You get the male ego and the female attachment, and they're against each other, but they're both training each other wrongly.
And if I was feeling judged by someone, how can I how can I overcome that judgment?
Yeah, it's a question of how much it matters to you, isn't it? You know, when we value people, is that we value them for a certain reason, and those reasons are it's just people that have come into your life that you shouldn't really be dependent on, but we're dependent on what they provide for us, what services they provide. So we rely on that rather than rely on that thing which is in ourselves. The thing that we're relying on, which we think is in them, is actually in the self. That's where your judgment takes a reverse role. The third eye starts to look inside what's happening. You're not actually receiving that love from that person, that respect from that person. You're actually receiving it from yourself. So you start to rely on something that's reliable, your own commodity. Whereas when that relationship took place, it was in a state of neediness, because I needed for someone to show me something I've got inside of me, but I think is in them. So it's impaired, isn't it? It's looking at, so the judgment's like that, then I become dependent. Then when that person that I respect and love and has shown me that kind of respect and love judges me, that's part of it, because that's the dependency. We're also dependent on public opinion, what other people think of us, and we've got to change that show as well, because that should repair that to a large extent. You know, when you're getting actually crunched, when people are thinking lowly of you in any way, it's good for me because my ego is being crunched and my ego needs to be knocked out of me. I need a lesson in humility at all costs. It will be good for me to have my ego crunched. Everyone's got it, the ego crunch, but all the person's doing is they're actually pressing my wound or my septic ulcer that I've got, that I've collected, thinking it to be a good thing. So when someone does crunch, it's like they're an instrument to bring me benefit. They're a teacher to actually.
And if I say make a judgment about you, does that have any knock-on karmic return?
Not really, no, because the judgment is great, it's absolutely brilliant, but is it a condescending judgment? Is it a negative judgment? Because judgment is just something that could better my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I could say, thank you so much, Rashmi, you just pointed me in the right direction. You don't know what that means to me. Well, you know, and that's the way to take those things, because, you know, the person will go away, well, I was trying to bring them down. I was trying to, you know, make them quivering wrecks on their knees. And, you know, I said this and I said that, and they took it constructively. I can't believe that. But you take what you need and disregard the rest, isn't it? So, you know, when you use the word judgment, we have to really use the word a negative judgment or a constructive. Because there was always constructive criticism. I never really understood that one, because criticism is a critic, isn't it? I don't like it. And whenever someone doesn't like your show, you know, that's connected to you, isn't it? Because you're the one that was to perform. But how many people actually say, you know, I didn't dance well, but I know I'm a good dancer. Normally they'll say, because you're only really as good as your last performance, aren't you? In the world of performance, as a mum, as a son, as a brother or sister, if you don't do something for a few days, it's almost like you've never done it. If you don't do the washing up for a few days, you've never done the wash, because it looks like weeks, doesn't it? It's been going on. Yet you might have been doing it for years on end. So you're only as good as your last performance. You can't carry on living like that. Easy to say what people think doesn't matter, but I've got to make it not matter. And the only way it does matter is that I got ego crunched, and it's good for me. And it will make me a better person, because it shows me something I didn't know was there, or I wasn't looking hard enough, you know, because the reaction is I don't blame you, but you blame me. I don't judge you, but you judge me. And we get into this altercation. And it's purely because people don't take it in a constructive way. A very negative person can't bring a very positive person down. Or as Socrates said, a bad man can't hurt a good man. You know, you might think that you're judging me, you might think that I'm about to take the hemlock and you've won, but a good person can never hurt, a bad person can never hurt a good person. And he used to say there'll always be a gadfly to come back after me and check you, whereas I'm going to a better place. So.
And sometimes we get stuck even judging the situation. We don't know what to do. So at that time, we listen to everyone around us and get more confused because we don't have the power to judge the situation and make the right decision.
Yeah. If you can imagine a loveful state which is imbalanced, and you use what you feel to be love, and it's not working in the sense of it's basically not being taken on board. And then obviously, rather than the loving mothering, you take to the lawful state where you make a stand, but without all the arrogance of it. You know, if you can take out all that stuff of, I don't know what they'll think of me. I don't know what I'll do if they say this. If you can take out all of that, because that's where all your energy is, you know, the aftermath. If you could just do the action because you tried that way and now you're going to try this way. It's only a play we're in. It's not real life. It's only a film. You know, it's not what people believe it to be. It's not life or death. There is no.
The people make.
They've made it. They've made it right.
Or death, isn't it?
Right.
If I don't make the right decision for this situation, it will be.
What will
end
happen?
of the world.
What if? Yeah.
It's like challenging people's perceptions, isn't it?
Yes.
Because people normally associate a judgment with something negative.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think anybody in this room even see this in a positive manner. The
No.
judgment can be positive.
Oh.
So.
See, I mean, my sense of smell isn't particularly good, and we'd had a situation where the carpet was smelling quite badly, and I couldn't smell it. So, you know, what if the carer comes in and smells it? You know, that was always the worry. What if the carer comes in, a guest comes in, what are they going to think of me? That's a favourite one. And this is the wrong kind of judgment. What do you think of you? That's what I should say to myself at that time, because that's to do with the situation. It doesn't really have anything to do with you. There should be a little voice in the back of the mind that says, how do you feel about you? Do you like yourself? Do you love yourself? Do you just want to be yourself and no one else? You know, and just forget you're the role for a while. How does it feel being outside of the role for a while, where you're not the carpet? Because at that moment in time, I'm the carpet that smells, aren't I? I'm the smelly carpet because my reputation's at stake. So if you could actually get perspective back again, get value back again, you'll find that the only reason why there's any fear or sorrow is I'm valuing the thing, the commodity, rather than the oddity, the self. So you're actually disconnecting and breaking that normal connection. What if, you know, I give Rashmi a lift home in the car and she sees all the coffee cups all over the floor, and it was someone else as well. You know, someone else did it. They were in the back and they kept on dropping coffee cups. But it's the way I think you see me, isn't it? But they put all that coffee cups there. And I might say to you in my defence, because that's what I'm always trying to do, defend something that I should be letting go of. And when I defend it, I keep it, I hold it, and I say, I know you might, I hope you don't think badly of me, all those coffee cups and that McDonald's half eaten, you know, it wasn't me, it was someone else that was in the car. And I'll say that thing and you'll turn round and say, I know you wouldn't do anything like that, and I feel good again.
Yeah.
But I should be feeling good.
Regardless.
Yeah, and watch you watch. Watch you watch.
And be happy about
Yeah,
it.
just like they do in the soaps, isn't
Yes.
it? They sit in a room watching people that sit in a room. That's what they do. They get enjoyment from the soaps because there's a feeling of someone else is worse off than I am. There's more dramas going on in theirs because people are making it up as they go along, and it's an escape from our own drama. But why is that drama having such effect that I need to watch a soap when I could be cleaning myself? Get it, soap?
I think you might have already answered this question, but I'll ask again. How do I know if I've judged correctly?
Well, you wouldn't be going by the results. You'd be going by how you feel.
Okay.
If you're attached to the fruit of the result, then that's the thing that has to be repaired. It doesn't really matter about the decision because that decision is already going to be biased, whether it's good or whether it's bad, whether it's right or whether it's wrong. I'm a part of that processing. I'm worried. I'm worried. And when I'm worried, that means I'll go, oh, thank God for that. I'm glad that worked out like that. And tomorrow I'll go, oh my God, it didn't work out like that. And then sometimes you see a repercussion of something that was right yesterday is wrong tomorrow. So it's always making you dance. It's pulling the strings. Whereas when I'm pulling the strings, it's I separate, I watch, I allow them to play their role, to say what they're going to say. I make a decision based on balance. Of if I've used love and it didn't work, I can try law and put my foot down without all the arrogance. I told you before, if you didn't do this, this would happen, without all that stuff of the ego, but just saying what will be what from now on, that this is what needs to be done. And if neither of those things, then you just need a lot of patience for something to finish. But it will finish. Yeah. It will come to the right conclusion because you've created that patience, that space from, I'm not the carpet, I'm not my work. People say, Beanie, your accountancy, I don't know where you learned that because this is another accountant said this, and you're not comparing yourself because there's nothing to compare. You're not that, so you can't be that. You can't get into a war with someone else if you're not in a war with your own. If who you are is not what you do, you can't actually come. But the structure has to change at that moment. So the way you actually process your thinking is that, well, I'm not an accountant. I'm a child of God. I came here as an incarnation into this world. I'm a guest to this world. I'm just playing my role. If they want to say those things, they're not really saying those things because most of them are based on misunderstandings. If you look at the way people who are in power, have their fingers on the button, are communicating with each other, they're misunderstanding each other because they don't trust each other. And it's their own lack of trust that they're trusting with. Isn't that amazing? So,
your judgment is clouded by your culture, your views and personal opinions and everything as well. So it is very difficult sometimes to get the clarity. Yeah.
But then, what does it really matter? I mean, when it's just a film, when it's just a play, when it's just a game, if you make a mess of it, you're only actually working to understand yourself. We might think it's to do with other people, other situations, and people even go, if I could change one thing in my life, I'd go back in time. And they say like as if it's a life and death. Well, you've got the same situations coming up in front anyway, because it's not the decision you made, it was what it was based on. As in my motive, I was connected to a particular motive that I wanted this thing sorted because it's making me peaceless. And people judgment is very often based on that. I'm trying to stop someone because it's making me peaceless. And the only thing that can make me peaceless is my peacelessness.
The process of ego crunching is quite painful.
Very painful, very painful.
How can we turn it to a positive one?
Because you're actually using the power to negate the ego. That's humility. That's actually recognizing that it's being crunched. So you are humility. You are self-respect, because it's no one with self-respect would be able to do that. No one with humility would be able to do that, and the proof of that is they don't. They just react to it with their own ego that makes it stronger. So if you're not reacting to them with the ego, you're reacting to your ego with your self-respect, your humility, and that should be recognised at that time, that you're actually breaking down the walls of negative emotion. You're freeing yourself from the negative I and my of the role. You're challenging the ego. No one's challenging their ego. They're all going with the flow. If you say things that suits them, they say, Rashmi, I love you. You're wonderful. You're the best thing that ever happened. Can't believe you're such a good worker. You know, you really do. You really make this place light. And if your ego gets involved, then it's, wow, do I? And then when you actually don't provide the service that they do, because you can't, because you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're trying to help someone else, and that means you're not able to help them. What happened to my support? So it's not your fault that I became dependent on you. So you've got to actually judge it correctly and be... And you look on it, I just think we're only actually understanding one thing and one thing only, with the power to judge, the power to discriminate, the power to tolerate as well, is a non-attached state of being. Because an attached state of being doesn't work, because it's already tied into the situation of the carpet, of the office, of the accountancy, as the mum or the daughter. You know, it's already tied by something. So our judgment is all impaired. And that's why they created this in the Bible. It's a very good thing to say, thou shalt not judge, but they mean it in a certain way, don't they? Judgment is a brilliant power, a brilliant quality, but it's when it's working for you in a fair way. So it's not about whether my desires are fulfilled or whether your desires are fulfilled. It's for the betterment of clarity. It's for the betterment of inner space. It's for the betterment of other people's feeling inspired, because what my decision is doesn't really have as much inspiration as a person you meet that's got their inner space.
So any judgment you make should be based on
It will
pure
come.
motives, isn't it?
Well, it will come. It will come because you've created that space for it to come. And whenever it comes, it should be looked on as very reliable, because it's part of your intrinsic intuitive powers. The power to discriminate and the power to judge is already etched in the soul, and there's a correct way of doing it, but there's no space to work. So because people are too busy overthinking the situations, because they're in an attached rather than non-attached state. So they jump the gun and they make decisions when they didn't have to make decisions. They could have easily just turned around and said, can we see about that later? Because it's not even now, it's for later. You know, when people say, I know what we'll plan, I know what we'll do, and they're believing to think ahead, have a bit of insight, you know,
So
or farsight.
The decision is needed, isn't it?
Yeah,
Most of the
absolutely.
time.
And it doesn't come up. It doesn't come up. So energy is wasted. Total energy is wasted. And yet that seemed a really good idea. Pretty it didn't work out. And that's because it wasn't necessary to think like that, because you're attached to a plan. You want to make God laugh, make a plan. So you don't actually plan. You're becoming synchronized to this space that you're creating, and meditation provides that, doesn't it? I'm here, and the world's there, and the world's always been there, but it's not here. That kind of profiling, where we're actually getting ourselves in a connection with ourselves, away from what's there. And also what people do to try to create space is one of the favourites, where they create a them and us. You know what they're like. No one knows who they are. No, they haven't got a name, but they're out there. And they'll always be out there because we're here and they're there. And you come alone, you go alone, isn't it? But when it becomes us, when I bond with us, this is our decision, we're together, this is the union against the management, whoever they are, because they keep changing places. One gets removed, one gets replaced, don't know who they are, but okay. You know what they're like. You know what they're going to be like. You know what they'll say. You do. And I'm creating this space, but it's a negative space that I'm creating because it's us, and it's got to be me separate from the body and the connections of the role, so that I'm allowing something. And you'd be very pleased when you haven't got to carry a manual round with you about what's right and what's wrong, because you're just working according to synchronicity and spontaneity, which is what a non-attached state does. That's why the emphasis is on, once again, the first lesson is the last. Soul consciousness will be with you. Most people will think about it. Most people will talk about it. Very few will actually do it. And that's the beauty. When you do it, you get the fruits. Know them by their fruits. That's what it says also, isn't it? So you're not looking merely towards right and wrong, good and bad, like the judge that, when he's having a good day, he knocks 3 years off the sentence. When he is having a bad day, he makes another sentence into a paragraph and then into a book, if he feels like it, if he feels particularly vindictive because his motive has changed. Doesn't feel so merciful one day. People's mercy and their love is not reliable. So it's fickle, isn't it? It moves according to the moods, according to the desires. So we'll have to do a judgment part 2, I think, as well, because there's a lot more to this subject. So we do a meditation to finish with, and
yes, please.
I create a bigger inner space with the feeling of being separate to the role, a non-judgmental state, looking at the world outside and not having a single judgment about the world outside. I see my role, and I no longer judge myself according to the role and roles that I play. They are only roles. The one that is playing is the one that is separate from what I do, what I've achieved, and what I haven't achieved. I make the things of matter just a little bit less, and I become more and more blessed the more I make it less and less, so that the feeling of being light, separate from the heaviness of the physical, the material, and the burdens of the role are left in the name and form of the role that I am not. I am the being, the eternal visitor, guest to the role. I look at that role as if I would look at anyone else's role as the world stage with all the actors playing their role, and I recognize no one in a familiar, body-conscious, burdenful way. I am able to take support of the role and then withdraw into my own inner space of freedom from even a thought, a single thought of the role, because I am too busy thinking about the soul. Om Shanti.